On today's episode of Career Connections, we have an extremely special guest, United States Representative Houlahan of the 6th Congressional District. And if I may, I have a bit of an introduction to give. So Congresswoman Houlahan is an Air Force veteran, has an engineering degree from Stanford, an MS in Policy and Technology from MIT, is an educator, an entrepreneur, and of course, a US Representative. So Representative Houlahan, how are you doing today?
I am well, thank you. This is one of my favorite parts of my day, is the chance to talk to young women like you.
That's so great to hear. So I know that I am and everyone else on the show are very, very excited to have you on our 4th episode. And let me just say, it is so cool to meet you, and I'm really excited to learn more about you. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So to start off, like I kind of touched on in my intro, you've had so many different careers and experiences in your life. So you're an Air Force veteran, an entrepreneur, engineer, and so much more. What inspired all of these different paths?
I think that it's a question that I ask myself a lot. I'm constantly trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up in a lot of different ways. And one of the things that I think is consistent in what it is that I've done is I've always tried to be doing something that is of service. And so, right out of school, I joined the military. I was an engineer for the United States Air Force. I worked on strategic defense initiative programs about ballistic missiles and making sure that we were protected from them. Following that, I got the opportunity to go back to school, as you mentioned, and to join some friends who were building a company together. It was a traditional company in the sense that it was a lot like Under Armour, if you can imagine an Under Armour, but for basketball. But the thing that was different about it is that we really wanted to take care of each other and take care of our community and take care of our planet by growing a good and big company. And so that was the next thing that I did. And following that, I worked at a nonprofit that allowed or tries to allow more companies to behave like that company, like that basketball apparel and footwear company, because I think it's really important that when you're working in a business, in a for-profit business, that if you'd like, that you can take care of not just making money, but you can also take care of the planet and people as well. And then from there, I did, as you mentioned, kind of pivot into education. I joined an organization called Teach for America. I taught high school chemistry. I've always been really, really passionate about science and engineering and very passionate about women and girls. I'm the mother of girls. And so I thought it was really important to try to understand what it meant to be a teacher, to be able to help as a business person for the education sector. And that was sort of my final stop, is helping to run a nonprofit that focuses on what I saw as a disparity. A lot of kids in our country don't have the same resources that you frankly do at school. They don't have the same opportunities to learn to read and to therefore be really good chemistry students. And so the last years before running for Congress, I was focused on helping to grow a company that focused on early childhood literacy, making sure that everybody can read by the time they're in 4th grade. And so that's my journey. And I think that the thing that is the same about every last one of the stops that I've taken is that I hope that they're in service, including being a mom. I hope that my job of raising my kids has also been part of my service, to make sure that I grow up young people who can also contribute to our country and to our planet.
That's amazing. I find it really inspiring that, everything that you've done is in a goal to give service and to help people and this country. And I think that is really inspiring to hear, because there's so much that can influence you to, go into certain careers. And what you said specifically is so interesting. And that's just really amazing to hear. So sort of as kind of a follow-up, how do all of these experiences tie together? Or what was something that you were able to take away from all of your experiences, a lesson per se?
So as I mentioned, kind of the commonality is, trying to figure out how to use your skills and your interest and your passion in their best way, depending on what portion of your life you're in. You don't have to necessarily come out the gate, right out of high school or college and say, I'm going to live a life of service in one particular area. You can evolve and you can move. And I think that is one thing that they have in common. But the other thing that I've been struck by in all of the different places that I've worked, whether it's in the military or in a business or at a nonprofit or in a classroom or here in Congress, is that it's all about the people. It's all about relationships. It's all about People are all the same, really, wherever you go. It's really important to understand what makes them tick. It's really important to help make sure that you're creating an organization that allows them to be themselves and that allows us all to collectively work to make, as an example, Congress a better place, the country a better place, or your company a better place, or your home a better place. So I've been struck by the similarities in all those different businesses and industries.
That's amazing. I think that that lesson is so important to learn, and I think that it's so interesting that you were able to really take something similar out of all of these totally unique experiences, and it was just great to hear that from you. So that's great. Now, sort of kind of moving into a little bit more of the specifics, could you tell us a bit more about your engineering degree or sort of your experience in that field in engineering and how that?
Sure. Sure. So when you're in ROTC, which is the one of the several programs that you go through to become a member of the military, I went through an ROTC program for the Air Force, and the Air Force program gives you a scholarship in a very specific degree. So I was told when I was 17 that my degree would be in industrial engineering and my scholarship would be in industrial engineering, because that's what the Air Force wanted and needed me to do. And so industrial engineering is kind of a cool part of the engineering discipline, because it's right where all of the engineering disciplines, civil engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, computer science, meet with business and meet with the world. And so you're sort of the translator for all of the different kinds of technologies and engineers and scientists to the business world or to the user, the person who's using that product at the end. But you also have the opportunity to have a little bit of a specialty in something like supply chain planning. A lot of what you've been hearing about in this pandemic is supply chain issues, right? You learned that we didn't have enough access to PPE, to the masks and other, gowns and those kinds of things. That was a supply chain issue. How do we make the things that we need? Where do those products and pieces of those products come from? How do we make sure that we can make them effectively and efficiently and profitably? Those are what industrial engineers also do. My graduate work is in something called technology and policy. Technology and policy is what it sounds like. It is also the intersection of a bunch of disciplines. It's the intersection of technology, and in my case, it was linear programming and operations research, which is a part of industrial engineering. And then it's policy. How do you think about, as an example, vaccine equity? When we have vaccines available, how do you make sure that you give it to the right people in the right order? That's a policy that has to do with the technology, which is a vaccine. And then the last part of that degree also has to do with the business end of that. So part of my classwork was business school classes as well. So it was a really multidisciplinary degree, and I would encourage all of you guys to think about multidisciplinary ways of thinking about things, meaning think about, it's not just your math class, it's not just your science class, it's not just your English class, it's how those all work together, so that you have to be able to communicate what it is that you're learning in math and science in English to other people.
That's amazing, and it's really cool to think about, how you were talking about it, and I think applying what you learn is a, large part of life, and what you told me about your engineering degree was so cool, and it's amazing how these examples in today's world with the pandemic and everything else, it can be used everywhere, which was great to hear from you. So sort of switching gears a little bit again, I read that your parents and your grandparents are Holocaust survivors. First of all, wow, that's really amazing. And I'm curious to know, did any of the stories that they told you, or maybe any of the experience that they had that they shared with you, inspire you to go into government and to make this country a better place for its citizens?
Absolutely. My father was a survivor of the Holocaust. He was one when the war started, and he was born in Poland. He survived because he was cared for by a Christian family. His family was Jewish, and they protected him and kept him from being murdered. And so that's a really good life lesson right there, is the amazing breadth of humanity. He came here with his mom and his grandmother, who also survived, when he was about 5. And he gave a life of service as well. So he was my inspiration in many ways, my mother as well. He served more than 30 years in the Navy in an effort to repay this nation for what it is that he has been provided, the gift and promise that he's been provided. And so his example and the example of my family, my grandfather, my mother's father also served a full career in the military, is part of why I have this sense of service, I think, today. But the other thing that my dad taught me and my mom taught me was that education is the only thing that people cannot take away from you. You can take away somebody's, job, or you can take away their clothes. You can take away any number of houses. All of those kinds of things happened in World War II and are still happening today. But you can't take away what's between your ears, And so that's why he and my mom always inspired me to pursue education. And that's something that I carry into Congress as well, and hope to, make policy that helps everybody be able to pursue education for their entire life.
Wow, that is so inspiring, and I truly think that one of the things that can inspire us to do what we do in the future can be experiences and other people's experiences that they share with us. And what you said just goes to show that it's a perfect example. And it's really inspiring to hear that, you want to make sure that things like that don't happen, and that you want to make sure that this country is safe, and that the citizens are happy with, what you do in Congress and being an educator and everything else. It's really, really great to hear that. So now I wanted to quickly give you some information about what we do. So in case you don't know, our team is a part of the First Robotics Organization. And FIRST, the word, is an acronym. Stands for the inspiration and recognition of science and technology. So FIRST has a series of programs that basically range for different age groups, all the way from FLL Junior, which is for early elementary students, all the way to our highest program, which is FRC, for, high school students. So our team participates in FTC, which is for middle to high school students. And we, to put it simply, build robots out of metal parts, and they're supposed to accomplish certain goals in gameplay, and basically just kind of do different tasks based on the season. So another aspect of FIRST is outreach, which is all about, communication and reaching out to others, kind of like what I'm doing right now. So that's kind of a little bit about FIRST and FTC, and sort of what we do and what our robotics team is a part of. So I'm very curious to know, did any clubs or activities that you did in your school life shape any of your passions or interests growing up?
100%. I think one of the most remarkable experiences that I had as a kid was, first of all, moving quite a bit. I mentioned my dad was in the military, and so I moved schools almost every year. I went to 12 different schools growing up. And so that certainly informed the way that I see the world. And in terms of clubs or opportunities, one of my most memorable experiences was as a second grader. That's not true. I guess it was third grade. We had the opportunity every week, once a week, to go to a different school for the entire day. And we got to learn what's called project-based learning, which is a little bit like robotics, where you're designing something to meet a goal, right? You have a project, and your project is to execute on a mission. And so this school that I got to go to once a week had a lot of different projects like that I was able to participate in. And it really inspired me to appreciate learning and to appreciate the diversity of learning. And so an example was I got to make a video, a film, a documentary, and my documentary was on elephant seals. And I got to learn all about the elephant seals of Nuevo Island in California. I got to film, a story about them. I got to win a prize, for my documentary. I also got, as part of that class, to design a civilization. My teacher challenged our class to design the archaeological artifacts that would represent a civilization, an imagined civilization. And then we buried the artifacts in her yard. And then the kids who came the next day from a different school dug up our artifacts, and their job was to interpret what kind of a civilization or culture that we had created. What were the people or aliens like who lived in that culture? And we, of course, had to dig somebody else's artifacts up. And those are the kinds of things that you never forget as a kid. And that's what inspired me in the classroom in chemistry, to try to make sure that I was always teaching not just tasks and memorization, but also why do we care about chemistry? Why is it important that we worry about these elements in this periodic table? And so those are some of the reasons why I was really inspired to, pass that excitement along as well.
That's amazing to hear. I just find it really interesting about how things can shape your future. Now, sort of getting into a bit of the specifics, I'm sure that a lot of people are curious. If you're passionate about something or are trying to say enforce a law, how do you overcome opposing views, either morally or politically?
It is hard. It's a long, long process. It's a process that involves being inclusive. And I believe that we're at a time in our country where we really need to listen to each other, and we really need to come to the table literally and figuratively and talk to one another and understand where each of us is coming from. Because in the case of being in Congress, genuinely believe that every person who's here and all the people who we represent are citizens and patriots of this country, and that we all want to see what's best for our families and for our community and for our country. And so I would say the best way to do that is to try to create pathways of communication, to try not to, be isolated in various silos, whether on the internet or, within your friend group, but rather to try to seek out relationships with people who are different than you. And I think that that's one of the things that moving around as a kid helped me understand. It's one of the things that being in the military helped me to understand. Being a teacher in North Philadelphia, which is a community where I was obviously white and almost every one of my students was Black. That helped me understand, what it means to be different and how to find common ground. All of those are experiences that I would encourage people to challenge themselves to do so that we can be a more welcoming country.
That's amazing. I think all of that is so important, and I think that being able to, you know, be able to just like relate and be able to kind of convince people and find a common ground, like you said, is so important to have anywhere. So it's really great to hear you say that, that you're, giving your effort, and it's just awesome. So my final question for you is, first of all, you're the first woman to ever represent the 6th district in Congress. First off, I just want to congratulate you because
Thank
that's an
you.
incredible
Thank
accomplishment.
you. I
So,
wish I'm not going to be the last. Let's just put it that way.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, what would you say to other girls watching who may want to go into government or go into a STEM job, or as you've even proven both, that may be aware of the possible challenges that come with these aspirations?
So I think the thing that I would challenge you to do is recognize, like, listen to what you just heard in terms of my path. It is not linear. It doesn't make any sense. All of those things don't really look like they connect, but they do. And the other thing I want you to hear is I think there's a lot of pressure on young people to know what they're going to do and what they're going to be when they grow up, and what college they're going to do or what they want to do as a profession. And I hope what you hear in my story, not just being a woman and a girl, but just being a person, is life is really long and you have a lot of opportunities to turn and to take different paths. But I would argue that your opportunities only expand with your education. So my advice would be work hard, at school. Don't shut any doors that you don't have to. Take math, take science, take all the classes you possibly can, so that when you get to a place where you can make choices for yourself, you haven't closed off any options or opportunities. I think that's really a big lesson to learn. Another thing, though, is not to negotiate with yourself. That's a piece of advice that my father and mother always give me, which is don't sit down in your head and decide why you can't do something, because the world is going to help you decide what you can and can't do. But you have to believe that you can do what it is that you're dreaming about doing, and let the rest of the world figure it out with you. So don't convince yourself that you're not good enough, or that you don't know enough, or that somebody else is better. Don't let that be a sound in your head. You have to reject that, and you have to let other people help you figure out what's possible. And I think that is another piece of advice that I would give young girls and women today.
That Wow, that's amazing. That's so great to hear. That obviously means a lot to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people watching right now. I cannot thank you enough, Representative, for joining me on the show today. It was truly incredible to hear about all your experiences, your insight, and everything else we talked about. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I'm really proud of you guys and the work that you're doing. I hope you're proud of yourselves as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Be well. Talk to you later.